Empires don't just fall apart overnight, They start to rot from the inside out. It's a slow burn. You might not see it right away because the decay is hidden deep down. But eventually the foundation starts to crumble and suddenly it all falls apart. Take the United States, for example. For decades, it's been building this massive economic system. It wasn't just any system. It became the backbone of global trade, finance, and overall stability. The US dollar? That became the currency everyone around the world wanted in their pockets. American markets? They pretty much set the pace for economies everywhere. It was like the US was conducting an orchestra and every major economy was playing along. Economic alliances, massive debts, even some risky spending, none of it seemed to matter because the system was humming along. But what happens when the music stops? When the conductor decides to leave the orchestra? What if the country that built this global network starts tearing it down? Donald Trump isn't the first US president to shake the table, but he might be the one to watch the whole setup collapse. His approach, slapping tariffs on imports, getting into trade tiffs, spending like there's no tomorrow, it's not just causing ripples. It's stirring up a storm. And if this storm turns into a hurricane, it won't just hit the US. It could sweep through the entire global economy. Now, let's not kid ourselves. The signs of collapse aren't always big and dramatic. It might start with something small. A broken trade deal here, a new tariff there. Quiet little moments that might seem insignificant now, but could turn out to be the points where everything pivoted. And guess what? We might already be at that tipping point.
I think he's doing his best.
Welcome to Real Finance. We're here to dive deep into what's really driving our global economy. From the stories behind major companies to the latest market trends, we're unpacking it all. Our mission? To make sense of complex economic issues and show why they matter to you. Chapter 1. The End of Globalization. Globalization isn't just about trading goods and money crossing borders. It's about power and influence. For a long time, the US sat at the center of a vast economic web. It dictated the terms of trade, shaped international finance, and its dollar set the global economic tempo. This setup allowed America to walk into virtually any market, anywhere in the world. But now that web is starting to unravel. With Donald Trump back in the driver's seat, things are speeding up. Old trade wars are reigniting, new tariffs are being slapped on allies and adversaries alike. The goal? To bring jobs back to American soil and protect domestic industries. But the reality is shaping up to be quite different. A global economic reshuffling that could see the US pushed into a corner. China, for one, isn't just sitting back. It's pushing forward with its own trade initiatives like the Belt and Road, strengthening ties with Africa, Latin America, and Europe, all without the US. Meanwhile, the European Union is distancing itself from US unpredictability by cementing deals with Asia and Latin America to secure their economic futures, independent of American influence. And then there's the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, stepping away from the dollar, exploring alternatives that lessen their reliance on an American-dominated financial system. Simply put, the global economy is adapting, and America's role as the central hub is under threat. Trump's policies seem to bank on the idea that the US market is irreplaceable, that no matter what, countries will need America more than America needs them. But what if that's no longer true? What if the world moves on? American exporters are already feeling the squeeze. Retaliatory tariffs from China and the EU are cutting deep into sales. Supply chains that once crisscrossed the globe are being redrawn as businesses look to reduce their dependence on unpredictable US policies. And that's just the beginning. We're living in a time where big changes are happening, and they're not just about trade. It's about who holds the power. The US used to be like the big boss in the room, making rules that everyone else followed. But now it looks like the boss might be losing some grip. Let's talk about what that means. It's not just about dollars and cents. It's about influence and security. When countries start questioning if they can rely on the US or start finding ways to work around it, things get really interesting. They're making new alliances, forming new trade agreements that don't depend on the US, and creating financial systems where the dollar isn't king. That means we could be seeing a shift in how the whole world does business. Now, let's think about what happens when countries don't need the US as much anymore. America's got to figure out its next big move. If you don't want to be surprised by any big moves, subscribe to Real Finance. Here we dissect the powerful forces reshaping the global economy, going beyond the headlines and the noise. For deeper insights, early access, and exclusive content, make sure to turn on your notifications so you never miss a video. Chapter 2: Tariff Troubles. Trade wars don't erupt with the thunder of bombs. They creep in with the scratch of pens across the bureaucratic tape. Tariffs, retaliations, economic fortifications. At this moment, the United States is elevating its walls of isolation higher than ever before. Donald Trump's return to the presidential arena has not only rekindled his strategy of economic combat, but this time he pushes further. Shifting from selective tariffs on China, he now advocates for a sweeping 10% import tax on all goods entering the U.S., with draconian penalties on products from principal adversaries. The aim? To coerce American companies into repatriating jobs. Yet, what unfolds is an economic collapse that sabotages the very sectors it's meant to safeguard. In theory, tariffs are designed to render foreign products costlier, theoretically giving American enterprises an edge. However, the reality of today's global economy has no such solutions. U.S. manufacturers are dependent on global supply chains and on a complex web of imports that are vital to their operations. Imports that are now drastically more expensive. Consumers are left to bear the brunt, with a 10% tax hike bleeding into the cost of everything from vehicles to daily groceries, igniting inflation that was once on the retreat. Farmers, already battered by the headwinds of past trade storms, stand on the brink as their traditional markets, like China, pivot to alternative sources. The echoes of the first trade war still linger over U.S. soybean fields, never having fully healed. A second onslaught might well be catastrophic. This is not mere conjecture, it's the grim reality we face. Car manufacturers signal impending layoffs as costs for basic materials like steel and aluminum soar. Retailers brace for a surge in prices that promises to strike consumers just as holiday seasons roll in. Foreign trade partners aren't just standing by, they're hitting back. Trade wars aren't fought in a bubble. Other countries are retaliating. China has slapped tariffs back on U.S. farm goods, effectively cutting off American farmers from their biggest market. The European Union is zeroing in on crucial U.S. industries like aviation and tech. Meanwhile, Japan and South Korea are tightening their trade ties with the EU and China, making them less dependent on the U.S. This isn't just a bit of back-and-forth retaliation, it's a major shift away from U.S. trade dominance. The last time Trump kicked off a tariff war, he helped out American farmers with heaps of government aid. But now, things look different. The U.S. is drowning in debt, interest rates are on the rise, and there's hardly any room to maneuver financially. We might not have a big enough safety net to fix the damage this time. Companies are starting to announce layoffs as costs climb. U.S. exports are dropping as our trade buddies turn to other suppliers, and rising import prices are firing up inflation again. Trump's plan paints tariffs as a way to bring jobs back to America, but it overlooks how our global economy is all tied together. Protective tariffs don't just poke at foreign competitors, they backfire on U.S. businesses too. What's scarier is that the world can adapt. If American goods get too pricey, buyers will go elsewhere. If American businesses can't cut it on the global stage, they'll shrink or skip town. Once these changes kick in, they don't just flip back, they stick. History has shown us this before. The Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930 was meant to protect American jobs, but it just caused a global trade meltdown and made the Great Depression even worse. We might be making the same mistakes all over again, and this time, the world might not stick around to see if we bounce back. For quite some time, America's debt was often taken as a joke and overlooked by lawmakers. Yet under Donald Trump's second presidency, this concern has become an imminent threat, accelerating with each passing day. The tax breaks that benefit the wealthiest individuals and ineffective tariffs have deepened the national debt. By the end of Trump's first term in 2021, the national debt had surged by $7.8 trillion. That is the highest ever by anyone, ever. Currently, the debt exceeds 120% of GDP, spending more than it earns from taxes each year. Also the first time, ever. The US is burdened with paying over $1 billion in interest each day, a situation worsened by rising interest rates. This creates a cycle of borrowing more to service existing debt. Trump's proposals for further tax reductions and ambitious infrastructure plans suggest a continued reliance on borrowing. Moreover, his strategy to use tariffs as a revenue tool is likely to contract the economy further, reducing overall tax income. The problem isn't the amount of debt, but the absence of a plan that does not send us to the gulag. Trump's policies continue to rely on the same approaches that have previously escalated the debt, but now with even less wiggle room. America has long been able to maintain significant deficits with little immediate repercussion thanks to ongoing global financial support. However, this long-standing trust is eroding. Notably, China has begun trimming its holdings of U.S. debt, and Japan. Traditionally, a major investor is seeking alternatives. Oil-rich countries like Saudi Arabia are broadening their investments into gold and other currencies, signaling dwindling confidence. If international investors start demanding higher returns for the risks they perceive, borrowing costs for the U.S. could skyrocket, compelling the government to make difficult decisions. Either reduce spending drastically, increase taxes, or resort to printing more money. Printing money to handle the debt will lead us to our end. Trump has suggested that the U.S. could simply print money to avoid defaulting, a band-aid dangerously oversimplified. The fallout will be severe: a worthless dollar, expensive imports, and out-of-control inflation. Similar scenarios have played out in countries like Argentina and Venezuela, where excessive reliance on printing money led to hyperinflation and economic collapse. America was never supposed to end up like this, but neglecting the debt doesn't make it disappear. The Roman Empire diluted its currency to fund wars. Sound familiar? We spend $1 trillion on defense. The British Empire accumulated debts it couldn't sustain. Sound familiar? As of April 2025, we have $36.2 trillion of debt. America is on the same path. If this administration persists with unchecked spending and borrowing, we will have a $1,000 bill created and eggs will cost $400. Not even kidding, bro, like, oh my days, it'll be anarchy. Debt crises erupt abruptly. Stability seems assured until suddenly, poof. You had $500 in your Bank of America account? Bank of America says no. Stores will instantly be raided. No country, not even a global powerhouse like the US, is immune to financial disintegration. The pressing question now is, how much time remains before we reach